Hi, everyone. Thanks everyone for coming. We wanted to wait a couple more minutes to let people come in who are going to attend, so thanks for your patience. My name is Laura Sclafani, and I'm an attorney, one of the partners at Evolve Family Law. And we wanted to do a presentation for parents, and I think there are some attorneys that are joining too. But mostly this presentation is about how, as a parent, the new child support guidelines that have been passed, that were passed this year and are effective as of July 1st of this year, some of them, how they impact your family and your child support and like the consequences and implications of that. So I cannot figure out how to share the PowerPoint without it taking over all of my screen. So I'm going to share it in the still open PowerPoint version. So thanks for your patience, because I need to show you guys and demonstrate a lot of how this is effective and how it affects you. So today we're going to cover several topics, all involving child support, and we'll cover the basics of child support so that you guys understand how child support works generally. And then we'll talk about how the old child support guidelines work. Everything for child support is covered under the statute OCGA 19615. Those set forth the child support guidelines, and that statute has done that for a long time. And that is the statute that's been amended so significantly this past year. So we'll talk about those old child support guidelines and the new child support guidelines and what's different currently and what's going to be different officially and effective in 2026. Then there's also a new child support statute that passed this year that is a separate section from the codified OCGA 19615, and now it's OCGA 19615.1, and that has to do with adult dependent support. And this is the first time that we've ever had that exist here in Georgia, and we'll cover how that works and how it's determined and when it can be applicable to your child as an adult dependent. So child support basics. For a long time, there's been a calculator that is now online that attorneys use and parties can use. For a long time, it was an Excel file. Unfortunately, maybe 5 to 10 years ago, they put it online, and it's an online calculator now, but it is a calculator. And so what's nice about determining child support is that generally you can put in the numbers that are applicable, and it'll pop out a number that's going to apply to your case and your children as to what child support will be. Generally, the person who has primary physical custody of minor children, meaning that the kids are with them the majority of the time, is going to receive child support of some kind. There are exceptions to that. Like, for example, if the person with primary physical custody makes way, way, way more income than the non-custodial parent, maybe they wouldn't receive child support, but generally that's a good rule of thumb. Sometimes also, if there is a 50-50 parenting time schedule, which is also called joint physical custody, one of the parents often does receive child support if the incomes of the parties are really disparate. And I want to show you guys how the child support calculator works so that we can walk through how this practically affects you. Okay, this is the child support website where the calculator is located. If there are attorneys here, you have undoubtedly visited this many times. If you're a parent, some parent clients I have explored this website on their own. You do have to make an account to do it and run a child support worksheet. But if you open an account, anybody can use this program for free. And this is where, if you're a former client or have consulted with me, this is where I've pulled the numbers from, is this calculator. So I just want to show you guys how that works. I'm going to open up an example and just unshare for one moment so that you guys don't see all my other cases and what they're named after due to confidentiality. Okay, so this is a John Doe, Jane Doe case. This is the child support worksheet and how you open and play with it once you create a case, and whether that's your case or one of your clients' cases, this is what the screen looks like and the input information that you're putting in. So just basically, I mean, you're putting in the names of the parties, putting in the names of the children and their birth years and which children are being included, and eventually you're going to print it to create a child support worksheet. But mainly child support is based on the gross incomes of the parties and the number of children. So here for this example, we have some income examples that Jane Doe and John Doe are using. In the basic information section, you would also be showing who is the non-custodial parent. So for purposes of this example, I have the non-custodial parent here as John Doe. Okay, so this is the child support worksheet. And for gross income, you list the party's gross incomes, the parents' gross incomes, and the number of children. And then there are a couple of other things that have to be included for purposes of determining child support, and those are called adjustments. One of the main adjustments that have to be included are on Schedule D, and those are the health insurance premiums paid for the children by one of the parents. So you would enter that here. And then work-related childcare, which is supposed to be included as an adjustment, but because work-related childcare can vary so much over a child's lifetime, there's daycare costs when they're little up until 5, then after care costs potentially, and then no childcare costs sometimes after they're of the age where they can be at home by themselves. So I, as an attorney, like to not include work-related childcare in the worksheet. You know, parties and attorneys do it differently, and judges request different things. But those are two of the main adjustments now, and adjustments have to be included, or they're supposed to be. Another example of adjustments now are pre-existing child support orders. If one of the parents is already paying child support pursuant to an order, that must be included. And if there is a child in one of the parents' households who is not subject to a child support order, but really should be, and the parent is responsible for them, that can also be an adjustment. And all of these things affect the ultimate child support number that is popped out. The difference between an adjustment and a deviation is that adjustments must be used, whereas deviations are discretionary, that are only applied if it's in the best interest of the child to do so. And there are lots of examples, but you know, some of them are a low income deviation. If one of the parents is very low income, you can change the amount, like dollar for dollar. A deviation would be, you know, if dad has a deviation of $100 downward, then that's going to decrease his child support by $100 every month. So there's the low income deviation, lots of specific deviations, which are, for example, you know, if there's high income, the child support guidelines up until this year, they only anticipated the total parent income between both parents of being $30,000 a month. Anything past that is not included in the amount of presumptive child support that is popped out in the calculator. So a deviation for high income is one of those discretionary things that you could change and increase the child support on that basis. And one of the things that's different this year is that while it used to only go up to $30,000 of combined income per month, now that the maximum is $40,000. So that's one of the big changes. Then additional other, non-specific versus specific deviations can be for health, dental and vision insurance, because remember, health insurance premiums are an adjustment, so they're required. Life insurance, travel expenses, that comes up a lot if one of the parents is out of state. And, there's a lot of flight travel to exercise parenting time. Alimony paid, mortgage, permanency plan, child care tax credit, and life insurance. I truly never really see those as deviations that are suggested, but people can try to do it. Remember that with a deviation, you have to prove that it's in the best interest of the child, and they're not guaranteed in any sense. And then there's those are the specific deviations, and a non-specific deviation, that's usually used when parties have agreed upon a specific amount for child support, and you just want to get the child support worksheet to reflect that. So maybe, if the parties have agreed on $1,000 a month for child support, but the gross incomes of each party lead it to say $1,200 in child support per month, you would do a non-specific deviation downward for the parent who's paying to take it from $1,200 a month to $1,000 a month, or a non-specific deviation in the amount of $200 downward. Interestingly, the parenting time deviation is still on here as the one of the deviations that can be applied. However, the parenting time deviation is going to become an adjustment effective 2026, January 1st, 2026, and we're going to talk about how that's going to be implemented and talk about the significant impact of that change. But as of now on this website, it is still considered a deviation, and that means that you are, it's supposed to reflect the difference in parenting time of one party. So if it's a 50-50 custody arrangement, then, whoever is supposed to be paying child support under this child support worksheet calculator, they shouldn't be necessarily paying that high amount when they have the children or child 50% of the time. So this is a parenting time deviation to change and accommodate for that. Additional examples of deviations that are discretionary are, extraordinary educational expenses. That's like if the child's going to a private school. Extraordinary medical expenses. Maybe the child has special needs and will continue to have, occupational therapy, physical therapy, some sort of specific medical need that's ongoing that justifies putting all of those expenses in the child support worksheet now. That's going to be the rare case, because with child support, parents are already, outside of this worksheet ordered to split the uncovered medical expenses in some percentage share. So it's going to be the rare time that this is used, but it is still a deviation that's possible. And then special expenses for child rearing. That's another one for example, very expensive extracurriculars that are going to be continue throughout the child's childhood that you want to go ahead and include in the worksheet, that probably aren't going to vary, because otherwise you would want to say how they're going to be divided if they're variable, so that neither party comes back to modified child support. I've mentioned a couple times that the deviations, they have to be justified based on what's in the best interest of the child. So you have to answer for any deviation in the worksheet online all three of these questions. You don't want the presumptive amount, meaning the amount that is presumptively going to be monthly child support without any deviations. You have to say that that amount would be unjust if you are trying to get a deviation, that it would serve the best interests of the child, and it wouldn't impair the ability of the custodial parent or the non-parent custodian to maintain these basic necessities. So the old child support guidelines before July 1st of this year, the Child Support Commission has been doing a study on the economic changes of our, economy and people's incomes as it relates to child expenses. We are supposed to do that as a state in Georgia every 5 years. And that has been, I learned this yesterday in another presentation, that has been happening all along. But the first time that we ever started doing child support based on both parents' incomes and how those relate to each other and the respective share of child expenses, considering both parties' incomes, that was based on a table from 2007. And even though we have been studying the economy since then, only recently, the most recent study of income justified changing the child support guidelines and changing the child support obligation table. So prior to July 1st, we were using a table that was based on economics basically from 2007, hadn't been updated. There are also limited adjustments. We just talked about the adjustments, work-related childcare, health insurance, a couple of others that are less common. But they're going, those are limited to only those adjustments. The deviations that we just went through, those really all lack a specific formula. And that's how deviations are supposed to work, basically because they're discretionary. But the deviations are, we just went through how many of them there are. In the old child support guidelines, also, there is only basically dollar for dollar decrease of child support based on if there are disability payments through Social Security, retirement, or disability. So if, for example, a disabled person who is receiving Social Security disability, a parent is receiving that and has a minor child, the child is likely to receive benefits, a portion of benefits on that parent's account. So if a disabled parent receiving Social Security does not have custody, the other parent has custody, but the child is receiving those benefits on behalf of the non-custodial parent's account, the support received by the custodial parent is decreased dollar for dollar by those disability or retirement payments. The new child support guidelines. So we have an updated obligation table, and that's effective now. And I'll walk through, how that impacts a couple of examples of child support in a minute. We have a new obligation table. In addition to those Social Security disability payments and retirement payments affecting child support, now there's a line item for veterans disability payments to also decrease or change dollar for dollar the amount, and that's effective. That is effective now as well. The parenting time adjustment is the most significant change, and that is technically not supposed to be effective until July 1st of 2026. But we are seeing many attorneys, many parties, many judges request that we go ahead and implement this because while it is not effective on the online child support calculator yet, it is good law and we have the formula for how to do it. And the only reason it was not implemented on the calculator is because that takes time for third-party contracts to do that math and do that coding to have the calculator work. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. There is also, and keep in mind, there was a parenting time deviation before. That's discretionary. Now it is not going to be a deviation where it's discretionary. It is going to be an adjustment that's required. So the parenting time that your parenting plan has, either, 50-50 custody or every other weekend for the non-custodial parent or every other weekend that's extended weekends, maybe Thursday, every other Thursday to Monday, and Thursday overnight in the off weeks, whatever the parenting time situation that you guys have is for your child or children is going to affect child support through a required adjustment that actually does count the number of days in a year to determine how that adjustment should be implemented. And so that means with those two or with the low income adjustment too, that's going to be effective at the same time because the calculations have to be effective. But it is good law and it's easy to implement now. It's pretty uncommon, doesn't come up that much, but instead of there being a low income deviation, there's also going to be a low income adjustment effective 2026. So that takes away two of the deviations I went over before and makes them adjustments. So those are the really big changes to the child support code. Okay, so I want you guys, whoops, want you guys to see how this is in practice affecting everything. So this is the first example. This is what a child support worksheet looks like when you print it from that website. You print it, and then this is what it looks like when it's submitted to the court with your court order, finalizing your case, whether that's just a child support case or it's a custody case or it's a divorce case. This is what the final child support looks like. And you can see that this is from my system and was a worksheet I created in 2019. So this is the old, based on the old obligation table. So here we have two parents listed, RL and ML, and one child. And the child is included in the child support worksheet. And we are stating here that the non-custodial parent is ML. ML's income, they actually both in this instance, so you guys can see what this looks like. These parents both earn $80,000 a year. And we don't know any information about the custodial arrangement other than ML is non-custodial such that RL, the plaintiff, is going to have primary physical custody and receive that child support. We will get more into examples with a specific custody arrangement later, but I just want to show you guys right now how the old obligation table and the new obligation table differ in terms of the amount of support received because of the economic study. So this is an old worksheet, and in the event that they both earn about $80,000 a year and ML is the one paying child support because he's not custodial, the old numbers stated that he would have paid or she would have paid $762 a month in child support. Under the new obligation table, ML would pay $778 a month. So I've done a few of these. You can only, and you can see I created that this morning. You basically just have to copy an old worksheet on the child support website. And if you copy an old worksheet from before this, the time that the changes were implemented, it'll show the difference between the old and the new. So you can see that that's not a huge monthly difference. Pretty much anyone receiving child support because of the obligation table changing, and as we all know, things are more expensive now, so it would make sense that child support is going to pretty much always increase based on the obligation table, but it's less than I thought it would when I have compared different worksheets to each other. In another example, I don't know why that keeps happening. In another example, this is John Doe, and we're going to be looking at this worksheet and example a lot. This is an old worksheet wherein Jane is making, it ends up being a little over $100,000 a year, her gross monthly income. And John, dad, he's making about $145,000, $150,000 a year. So, and there's one child, and the non-custodial parent in this example is John Doe. So based on the old child support worksheet numbers and obligation table, John Doe is going to be paying $1,350 a month in child support. Under the new obligation table, he's going to be paying $14.44 a month. So there, it's really not a huge difference, which has been surprising to me. The big change is the parenting time adjustment, and I want to show you guys how that change is impacted. So the parenting time adjustment, the parenting time deviation, like I said, it's been discretionary for a long time. And we as practitioners and parties and judges, we have never had any formula or instruction as to how we should be, determining and calculating the parenting time deviation. But we're one of between 6 and 9 states in the whole country where the parenting time was not considered in the amount of child support received by the parent receiving child support. We were under the impression as practitioners, that the child support worksheet, that there was an assumption built in that is not enshrined in the law anywhere from the old law and is not even in the legislative intent, but very seasoned, when I became an attorney, very seasoned and respected attorneys all over the state all believed that the presumptive amount of child support was based on an every other weekend schedule. So a schedule wherein, the non-custodial parent had parenting time with the child every other Friday through Sunday, for example, which is known as Schedule A parenting time and used to be pretty standard, even though it's not anymore. But we all believed that, judges believed that, everybody believed that. And it was only in the past couple of years that it became known that the parenting time, or sorry, the presumptive amount of child support, it actually has, ever since this calculator was created up until now, assumed that the non-custodial parent exercises 0 parenting time and that the custodial parent, it has 100% of the parenting time. Because obviously, if, and I have my child and his father aren't together. So, the parenting time schedule we have has, one of us having the child significantly amount of time and the other a significant amount of time too. But if one parent is receiving child support and it's not taking into consideration, the other parent's time, any time that the other parent has time with the child, then it's not truly reflecting the economy. And we were only one of 6 to 9 state minorities, minority states where this wasn't considered up until now. This adjustment, which is going into effect on the calculator at the beginning or in July 2026, it asks, and the formula prescribes that we are supposed to now, and parties and judges should now count the number of actual days within a 2-year annual period wherein you're going to have parenting time overnight with your child. So we will actually need to be determining the true number of days overnight specifically, in a period of 2 years to get the annual average wherein you're actually exercising parenting time. However, that is not on the calculator yet online. And so it takes time to do that. We're going to have to figure it out, but you can see how significant the implications are on child support when suddenly every single day of parenting time throughout the year is going to impact the amount of child support someone receives. If I go to, it is not available on the website, but if I go to the Child Support Commission website, that takes you to the Georgia Child Support Calculator. And there is actually a tool to do the parenting time formula, because as I was mentioning, while the actual effective date is not until July 2026, we're kind of in this weird no man's land period right now, because it is good law we have the formula set forth in the statute for how to implement the parenting time adjustment rather than just a deviation. Judges are actually asking us to go ahead and implement it because they don't want to be hit with an onslaught of, changes and new cases filed come July 1st, 2026, when we could be implementing it now and preventing additional litigation. And also because judges are learning for the first time now as well that the prior child support guidelines did not assume that the party paying child support had any parenting time whatsoever. And so the judges that I've spoken with about this have viewed it as just being patently unfair, that the child support is being ordered, assuming that that parent's not exercising any parenting time. So we are receiving instructions usually to go ahead and implement it now and have obtained tools to do that, even though they are not on the child support, calculator website that I just walked through with you guys. There are a couple tools to do this. So I want to show you guys how that works and then show you examples of how this would impact child support and impact the child support that you might receive. So the website takes you to this parenting time formula tool and then gives you a couple of other states' calculators for how to actually run the number of days per year. One of those calculators is the Minnesota calculator, which is right here. So this is the calculator that Minnesota uses to determine, how many days in a 2-year period each parent has parenting time with the child. And this is what the Georgia Commission on Child Support and specific judges are asking us to use as well. There's an Oregon too, an Oregon calculator too, but I am liking the Minnesota one better. So if we've got parents, Jack and Sally, this is going to determine over a 2-year period who has the child or children when. In this example, I have done it for exactly 50-50. If there's a 50-50 joint physical custody arrangement, one of those schedules, there are lots of different schedules for how to do 50-50 parenting time, but one of those is week on, week off. So I have here, Jack getting 50% of the time and Sally getting 50% of the time. And then since holidays and summer parenting time is usually equally given to both parents, and holidays are generally distributed equally too, really in any parenting time situation. So with a week on, week off like this, or 50-50 arrangement that's true 50-50, you can pretty much assume that there'll be a very equal amount of parenting time. If you were to reset these calculators, you can ascribe anything to Sally as the mom or Jack as the dad to come up with, how many days a year it's going to be. And I'll show you a couple examples of that. Okay, so if I am using the incomes for Jack and Sally as being the same as like John Doe, and I could just name them John Doe and Jane, but so John's got 89.16 a month, or Jane's got 89.16 a month, and John has got about 12,000 a month. And let's assume that this worksheet has them having, 50-50 parenting time exactly. Okay. So in the Minnesota parenting time calendar tool, this is the average over 2 years of the overnights, 183 versus 182. Really, it's 50-50. And then that tool that, the Child Support Commission website directed us to is right here. It wants me to put in the number of parenting time days for each party. And then it wants me to, from this worksheet, put in the pro rata shares of basic child support obligation for each parent. So I put those in here. 897.18 directly from that worksheet and 1215.82. That changes and makes it so that there needs to be a deviation for dad downward in the amount of 1,049.26. So you can see that I do that here. Ordinarily, dad, if dad was the non-custodial parent, which we list here, and dad is supposed to pay, over $1,400 a month, but that parenting time adjustment is now going to require, since they are 50-50 custodial parents, a downward deviation in this amount. His dad's child support obligation on a monthly basis is decreased to $395 a month. So that's significant. And what's very interesting is that we used to do this a completely different way. We used to, these are the presumptive amounts of child support. In a 50-50 situation, up until this guidance, what I would have done to determine the child support in a 50-50 situation is subtract $668.75, one party's obligation, from the other party's obligation. Subtract $669.75 from $1,400 basically. And that would have led to child support paid by dad in the amount of $775 a month. So even though that's what we used to do and thought it was accurate, that's not the way that they have prescribed now under the law, that the parenting time deviation needs to work. If you read through the statutes, I'm glad that these tools exist, because if you read through the statute change now, there are exponents involved, exponential math involved, and these calculators and tools really are truly needed to determine what it is, but it has been shown to have a much larger impact on the amount of child support received than anybody realized it would. And it really sets into perspective how significant this change is and how incorrect everything was being done before. If we weren't the judges view it as unfair, but it could be considered incorrect if we weren't taking into consideration any parenting time exercised by the other parent, assuming that they were exercising zero parenting time. We would do them on our own for 50-50 situations, but that was really it. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. Even if it was really close to 50-50, we wouldn't implement, or I wouldn't implement, a parenting time adjustment or deviation of any kind at all to determine the child support number. In another example, so I like to call the every other weekend from Thursday to Monday and off week Thursday night overnights in a custody situation, and that being the parenting time schedule. I like to call that schedule the Fulton County special, because I have found over the last few years that is Fulton County's often default, and everything for custody is based on the best interest of the child. But I find that schedule is often the default schedule, wherein it used to be that the default schedule was that the non-custodial parent would have, every other weekend, right, from every other Friday to Sunday. That was considered Schedule A parenting time, and it was the default custodial schedule maybe 20 years ago. But in the last several years, we have, as a nation, and with the science, we have learned that the science shows that as long as there are two good parents, that kids really do better with at least 35% of time with the non-custodial parent. I think the judges have learned that over time. They haven't explicitly said that, but that is what the science is showing. And again, we're, remembering that that's assuming that there are two good parents. That is not always the case, and custody is always based on the best interests of the child. But for purposes of what is more typical, an every other weekend parenting time schedule, where it's just every other weekend from Friday to Sunday for the non-custodial parent, that's considered to be pretty limiting. I'm just going to adjust this, sorry. That's considered to be pretty limiting. And now it's expanded a lot what the typical schedule is. And it's getting, that ends up being about 65, 35, 60, 40 or so, especially when you count in the splitting of holidays and the extra summer parenting time. So for that schedule, which I call the Fulton County Special, I have done the Minnesota child support calculation is implementing that here. So you can see that Sally has more time. So she's got the child at issue for, it ends up being about 60% of the time, but she's got the child on a regular weekend schedule for 9 overnights in a 14-day period or in a 2-week period. She's got 9 overnights. Dad has got 5 overnights. And that is dad has the child every other weekend or every other extended weekend from Thursday through to the following Monday morning of school starting. And then on his off weeks where he doesn't have weekend parenting time, he has overnight parenting time on Thursday night. That's where I'm getting the 9, overnights in a 2-week period for mom and 5 for dad. In those instances though, in most parenting plans, big holiday periods like spring break, fall break, February break, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Mother's Day and Father's Day are generally given to the parent, who it's applicable to. And long weekends like Memorial Day and Labor Day, things like that are often given to whichever, either specifically given to each parent alternating years or given to whichever parent had the child that weekend and then just extends their time to like Tuesday instead of Monday, because those holidays like Labor Day and Memorial typically occur on a Monday. So this is implementing the Atlanta Public Schools calendar and like a pretty typical summer and holiday schedule, wherein those big holiday periods are alternated or Christmas break is split, and each parent gets 2 weeks of parenting time in the summer. So implementing that schedule over a 2-year period, it ends up, because of those holidays and summertime periods, that Sally mom has about 60%, dad has about 40% of the time. And it averages the 2 years and gives you the yearly average overnights. So in this same example, I pulled the number of parenting time days for each party here, and that led to only a deviation of $545 dollars for Jack. So you would implement that on here to show the difference in his child support amount. We are being asked right now to enter these deviations in the Schedule E, area for deviations, even though it is not a adjustment yet and won't be until July of next year in 2026 on the actual calculator. What judges are requesting and the commission is encouraging us to do by having these tools on their website now is to go ahead and implement them on child support worksheets. So you can do that by entering the deviation, entering the amount that will be the adjustment in a year, a year and a half, and entering it instead as a deviation and answering those questions. I know that this is confusing. The big takeaway here as a parent is that, one, child support has been based on, if you're receiving child support, it's been based on the non-custodial parents not getting any parenting time whatsoever. And the legislature viewed that as unjust. We were actually in the way minority for doing it that way. And it could mean that you will be, brought back to court on that basis. One of the attorneys who's on the commission and has been on the Child Support Commission and helped develop this law, Katie Connell, she did a presentation to attorneys yesterday, and she stated that yes, absolutely, there's going to be modifications because of this. I don't know, even though we are as attorneys being directed to answer, to go ahead and implement these now as deviations, I don't know that right now we'll expect to see modifications because there's not an effective calculator tool to do this yet. But come July 1st, 2026, everyone is expecting modifications, even if there hasn't been a change in income of the parties or the needs of the child. Because generally, to modify child support, if you already have an existing child support order, you have to show that there's been a material change in either the incomes of the parties or the needs of the child. So we all wondered when this passed whether just changing the code would count as that, as meeting that standard. And from some of the attorneys who are on this commission and have, written this code and are seeing the changes as they are actually calculated, judges and those attorneys, and now we are expecting, yes, an onslaught of modifications to come, with the basis being that the needs of the child have changed because the old calculations did not account for parenting time whatsoever. I think that this is also going to lead there to be a fight over, custody and parenting time in a way that we haven't seen before, which is very unfortunate for kids who already are, subjected to litigation, and the more conflict that is between their parents in a custody or divorce situation, that has negative impacts for kids lots of times. But unfortunately, I think this is going to lead to more litigation and conflict for families and more protracted litigation if child support truly does change based on the amount of overnights, the exact number of overnights that each parent has during the year parenting time with the child. So if you are the parent, and are watching this who is paying for child support, you should be justified in wanting to modify that. I wouldn't, there's a risk to any person who's filing any sort of litigation, for any parent who's paying child support, whether that's you or your co-parent, that person who's going to file to modify is taking a huge risk in poking the bear. That maybe you're a parent who is receiving child support, but they are way behind in child support. Well, if your co-parent files a modification on this basis, then you probably are going to want to counterclaim for something, maybe a modification of parenting time to get more days, or counterclaim for the contempt and the lack of child support or reimbursements that they've been paying. I think that anybody in filing this litigation should be concerned about, the ramifications and implications of filing something in the first place, but it is something to consider. And if you're the one who's receiving child support, I mean, I have to hope that your co-parent won't learn about this, but if they do, then yes, there may be litigation filed against you, unfortunately. And, we are happy to help with anybody who'd like to know what what the child support would look like. If you don't want to, this is complicated, the system. If you don't want to run that on your own, we are happy to do that for you. And consult with anybody and answer any questions about how that might impact your particular case. For the, the only other deviation that's becoming an adjustment is the low income deviation. This doesn't come up too much for cases where there are attorneys, but for pro se cases, like I used to work at Atlanta Legal Aid, low income clients were who I represented as a legal aid attorney. So it comes up a lot for many family law litigants. And basically how the way that that's going to affect everything is that there is while it's also not in the calculator right now, and so we really would have to do it as a deviation rather than adjustment. The code does specify exactly how to implement it. So again, while I think judges are more focused on this parenting time adjustment and implementing that than the low income deviation adjustment, potentially, you can do it on your own as a deviation if you want to now. So I'll show you guys a couple examples of those. Okay, so in the new code, you can see this adjustment table. Basically, what you are supposed to do is to run the child support worksheet normally. And if a parent's income, the parent who's paying child support, is below these numbers right here, then you see how many, children there are in the case, and you compare what the presumptive amount of child support is with this number that's applicable, at or below 1550, you cross-reference them and determine which number is applicable, and the lower of the two numbers is what is used. So in this case, there are two children. Jack is the non-custodial parent. And because of that table that we saw, I have him only, earning $1,500 about a month. And Sally's earning $10,000 a month. So Jack would, Jack is the non-custodial parent. So he's paying child support. And the presumptive amount is $285. So and there's two children, remember? So if we compare that 285 number to this table, he's earning $1,550. There are two children, 372. So because 285 is lower than 372, we use that number. You just have to tinker with like the amount that the other custodial parent is earning to know whether either the table is used or the presumptive amount is used. So in this example, where I change only the amount that Sally is earning to $5,000 a month from $10,000 to $5,000 a month, the presumptive amount for Jack is $374. And now that is two children, 50-50. It is slightly higher than 372. So you would do a downward deviation of $2 to get to this lower number because you're supposed to use the lower of the two numbers. I'm sure that if I had Sally's income even lower, his support would go up, and therefore it would be a bigger deviation downward. But that's how the low income deviation works. The only other big those are the main big changes in the child support 19.615 guidelines statute. I mentioned at the very beginning that there is a new code section 19-6-15.1, and that's dealing with the adult dependent support. So in that type of case, it's really what's interesting, and I learned yesterday at the presentation, is that this did not go through the Child Support Commission at all. The Child Support Commission had nothing to do with it. And what is most interesting is that it doesn't really have a formula. Unlike child support for minors, where there is a clear formula, now even more of an intense and complicated formula with these adjustments, there is no formula for this. Basically, you are supposed to, figure out what the parents are capable of paying, and you have to show that the adult is a true dependent child. It is, and yet, you have to prove that the dependent adult child is an unmarried individual who has reached the age of majority and is incapable of self-support due to physical or mental incapacity that began before reaching the age of majority. So that piece is really important. If you have a child who, was fine and totally capable of self-support at 18, and then at 21, something happens and they're no longer capable of that, you wouldn't be able to use this statute to get support, I don't believe, according to the language. I've not seen this case yet occur. It is a new type of action that could occur to get the adult dependent support under this, and I haven't seen it, but under the basic language of the statute, you wouldn't be able to obtain it if a later event causes the dependency. It is, you can't start this type of action until a child is at least 17 and a half years old. However, if there's an existing child support case already happening, and the minor is under that age of 17 and a half, and the parties know that their child's a dependent and want to agree to extend the child support past the age of majority, they can do that, and under that situation, maybe they do use the formula for minor children. But really, this is calculated not with a formula at all, and is more like alimony. And, it's more based on what the parties are able to pay, and, how basically allows for financial circumstances and changes to allow for modifications as well. But it's really just based on certain factors, much like alimony, and there's no clear formula to it. So these are big changes within our child support code and for practitioners. And I'm sure that as parents, any parents attending, you guys have questions, and any attorneys attending, you might have questions as well. So I really appreciate you guys joining us. And, I'd love to talk about this more on an individual level with anybody attending. And if you'd like to call us to set up a consultation to see how this more directly impacts you based on your numbers and your child support, worksheet and your parenting time schedule, please feel free to reach out. I did have one question from an attorney who asked that, have I found that the judges want a copy of the printout from the Minnesota Parenting Time calendar? So I'm actually on the Atlanta Atlanta Bar Association Family Law Section board. And for the presentation at the Family Law Section virtual breakfast yesterday, where Katie Cannell talked about this, we, as the board members, actually surveyed we surveyed judges all over Metro Atlanta to see what they would like with this, whether they, are they wanting the parenting time adjustment as a deviation now, one, and two, if so, what do they want to see? It was a mixed bag of responses. A lot, of judges said that they would like you to go ahead and implement it. And most said that, yes, they would like to see these actual calculators. If I haven't had this come up yet where I'm presenting it to a judge, I've seen and done the adjustments and mediations before because of hearing that, but I've not presented it to a judge. But a lot said that they would want to see the exact calculator saved and printed out as exhibits to show, how you arrived at that number. Are there any other questions? We have a Q&A chat box if anybody would like to type anything in. And I know that we started a few minutes late, but we are rounding out on the hour, so I don't want to take too much of anybody's time yet, and appreciate everybody who attended. Any other questions? Nope. Okay. Well, I so appreciate everybody coming in the middle of your workday on a Friday. I very much appreciate that. And reach out to me directly if you have any questions about how this works. I know, especially my parents who are attending, I know that this looks very complicated, and it is. And I know and believe that they're going to be able to streamline it more when they get the actual calculator to show to implement this for you and for parties. And I also think that they're likely going to come up with, in certain situations, how many parenting time days is it going to be if we split these holidays and these holidays and have 2 weeks in the summer, each of us, or 3 weeks in the summer, each parent, and this is the schedule. I think that we are going to receive some guidance as to what the parenting time days likely will be or around there so that we can, streamline that process, not go through this excruciating process of counting the days. But I do think that we will also have to be exact, and I'm hoping that they will figure out. I don't love Minnesota's, I don't love Oregon's. I hope that we will have the best way to determine that in our state. And, if anybody wants to play with those, feel free to. And I know that the commission is taking feedback. They're not promising to implement it, but they are taking feedback about what they would like to see, in the calculator and how that works. So thank you all so much for attending and have a great weekend. Bye.